Co-chair, we'll call this to order. Okay.
All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order of the Active Recreation Asset Working Group. My name is Heidi Frail. I'm a member of the Select Board. And I'm co-chairing this meeting with Matt Borelli, also of the Select Board. So I think the first thing to do is just to do some introductions. So perhaps we just go around and introduce ourselves and then come on to the folks on Zoom. Sorry.
My name is Stacy Mulroy. I'm the Director of Park and Recreation.
I'm Frederica Lawan. I'm on the Commission of Park and Recreation.
Michelle Geddes, Park and Recreation. I'm Susan Welby. I'm representing CPC.
I'm Sue Barker and I'm here from the conservation.
I'm Sarah Nachasik, and I think I'm called the at-large member.
Very good.
Good.
And then we have a couple of folks on Zoom. You want to introduce yourselves? Maybe you start with John.
John Conley from the Finance Committee.
I'm Dan Lee. I'm the Director of Athletics for the Public Schools.
Matt Borelli, as a member of the Select Board.
Welcome, everybody. So I think next topic of business is to review the charge of this committee. And I'm just gonna read from the actual charge list here. The purpose of the Active Recreation Assets Working Group will be to serve in an advisory capacity to the town in space planning for the future of active recreational opportunities in Needham. The working group will evaluate existing town-owned assets, identify assets for future potential acquisition, identify unmet needs for active recreation, and review space requirements for each. So the charge here is to seek public input to identify unmet active recreation needs, including but not limited to action sports parks, pickleball, tennis, basketball, Charles River access, and off-leash dog areas, to determine asset requirements for each unmet need, to inventory the town's existing assets, land and structures for potential active recreation use, to identify assets for potential future acquisition for active recreation use, to evaluate opportunities and challenges of existing and potential assets, and prioritize unmet need and make recommendations for future action, including funding considerations and action steps. Everybody on board? So far, so good? All right. So I'm going to review the draft work plan. And we have a pretty accelerated schedule. The hope is that we can review our charge and come up with some potential solutions, including public comment and participation, in time to get to town meeting with a potential study that for feasibility for whatever choice we make. Okay, so do all of these, has everyone looked at the draft work plan and all the dates and public schedule, and everyone's good with this? Okay.
I mean, my only concern is for the public hearing, will we be ready for a public hearing just after tonight's meeting? Like, doesn't make sense to have it come up next.
Well,
I think part of that public hearing process has to be, and I know Park and Rec, I'm assuming has, and Heidi and I have talked about this, a map of the town with certain areas that are available or that have been discussed. And I know that you've had hearings from different user groups that are interested. So I think that information would be critical prior to that public hearing. And I don't know if that's something that you will be able to provide before the 31st, as well as kind of a rundown of space needs for, these different activities. Of course, we're going to hear from the public on them, but just to give a primer, I think.
Yeah, I
would be
mean, we're
important.
working with the GIS folks to get some
Great.
like overviews of what the town lands looks like and what some opportunities are, but also just to get a broader overview of what we have in Needham. So it should be easy enough to pull that together.
Yeah, I guess we were under the impression that there was an existing inventory, even if it's incomplete.
there is an existing inventory. It is probably not all the way up to date, certainly. Because I haven't updated since I've been here, so it's always a work in progress, but yes, we do have an inventory.
So for example, like, just say the skate park, something that we're obviously all into, like the idea of how much has actually been requested to Park and Rec, or we'll hear that during the public comment period, but it would be nice to know going in there kind of a range and say, okay, we're looking for a half an acre or an acre, or here's what, just to get an idea, so we're not wasting our time on smaller parcels. But that's just a thought. I guess the question that we would have is, do you think by January 31st, we'll have some type of framework so we can have a public hearing? Okay.
Well, also, I would think that it would be important, it's important for us to have an inventory of what we have, but to match that up with the user need, we need to understand better what those user needs are.
Mhm.
Yes.
So not just, we want a skate park, but it has to be a certain size and it has to be whatever else it has to be.
Yep.
Because otherwise it makes it hard to then return to the inventory. I guess I would say we need the needs first, like the maximum and the minimum needs,
Right.
especially the minimum needs. And then we can return and match those against the inventory and see what can be done.
Mhm.
But I guess my feeling is that probably the public hearing or the public input would be more important up front than even having the inventory.
Yes, I think you say we can get the inventory by the 31st, but even if it was just a rough idea of like the ranges, like you're talking about, going into it and said, here's what we've heard from our public, so we're not reinventing the wheel. Okay, we've heard we need half an acre to an acre and a half. And then when the public hearing, we can actually hear and try to refine that. I think those are both critical before the public hearing. And that's something we think can be delivered. Okay, great. That makes sense, Heidi?
It feels,
Sure.
I guess just from my perspective, it feels like it would be helpful to have one meeting in between. Like if we had all that information today
Mhm.
of a map, an inventory, we could, we're happy to provide the feedback that we've gotten. But I think going in informed to the public hearing would be more helpful than using this. I think we could use our time
Mhm.
differently if we had that information in front of us and had time to prepare that before going to the public hearing, so that we could put those comments into context. I think that's my concern is we'll hear pieces of public comment, but not be able to make sure that all parties are represented, that we've heard from, that we've been able to quantify what that means in terms of cost and acreage. I think that's important to have prior to going in.
Okay.
I have a question, since everybody seems to already know what's available and what you're gonna use it for, then why are we here?
I don't think that, I don't think that anyone does. feel
No,
that
the
way.
idea is that we have many needs that have been brought up to both the select board and Park and Rec. And we are trying to find a path to see what are the options around town that those would fit into. And it's up to this group to prioritize those needs, as well as kind of think outside the box on certain parcels and say, you know what, I never really thought that we could do it that way, or here's what you need for that, what we don't. need. So that's really our job. And then we're gonna make a recommendation to the select board. So it's not, the charge is kind of defining what those needs are, so we don't get, we have so many requests. So that limits it, but then the idea is to really try to find a home for these things and prioritize them. But we go in, I think some of us go in with certain areas that you want to see more than others. So that's going to be a discussion kind of as we move ahead, how to prioritize.
It sounds like just from this is the highest demand at the moment, look like an action sports park and a pickleball court. Are those kind of the highest demands that have?
Well, actually, I guess to your point, Michelle, the amount of conversation that I've heard is so minimal that I really couldn't tell you what the highest need is. So to your point, if you have a synthesized kind of public communication understanding that you all could share, then that would be something that we would need to see. But I mean, I wonder if that's something that we could share at the public meeting.
This is my question. Do you feel like all the user groups that we are, because I'm so fresh to this commission that
Sure.
I have not been exposed to all the feedback and do you think that we're gonna get a lot more public input at this meeting that we haven't already gotten, or different, I should say? I mean, there may be more people that come and express opinions, but I don't think that we have a ton of other projects that would have the amount of support that I would say the top 3 or 4 that have been discussed would have, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and I think it just depends how we structure that public hearing, because I think we will have a ton of demand, like we will have a ton of participation from the groups that are listed here. And the risk is that we're spending all of that time hearing from the groups that we've had multiple meetings with multiple times spent. So
Mhm.
I absolutely want to ensure that we hear from the public, like sort of ensuring that we're hearing from, if there's anything that we've missed from this list, I think should be represented. Or if there could be one member who's talking on behalf for 5 minutes on each of these, like
Yeah.
just having a much more structured.
That's good for Amber to put on it. for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
I think that's great.
Because we could spend hours on the skate park and we've learned lots about it, but I just wouldn't, I'd want to make sure that there's time for others to participate if needed. So,
So would it make sense if we move the February, except for the debrief from public meeting? But if we moved up that February 3, so we could get the inventory of the town's existing assets, we could post that on the web. Review asset requirements for each unmet need as you know them to be right now. And then,
What if we just switch the dates of those 2 meetings?
right,
I
exactly.
think that could just
That's what I'm
make
saying.
them
So we
more
move that up in the
productive.
public, right, in the public hearing would be after that.
And then the second
So
February
public-
meeting, we would debrief.
That's right.
Yeah, and then
Okay.
evaluate.
And evaluate. So we wouldn't be
So
adding-
January 31st is our meeting,
Yes.
Yeah,
and then we just move debrief from public meeting
Mhm.
Yeah,
down to February 4th,
yeah.
right? And
Those aren't.
I was
February-
gonna say, those
February-
aren't the dates, right?
No.
Those are.
No.
just the-
No,
oh, yeah,
those are
sorry,
just- right,
sorry,
those
yes.
Yeah.
There was, yeah,
I had
there's
the same-
a couple with
Isn't that
dates
a
on
Saturday
them.
or
Yes.
Sunday?
no, we're not that aggressive.
Really
Yes.
hardcore.
Saturday.
We are moving.
Yeah,
People, we got
Just
work to do.
joined, but that one seemed rough.
Right.
Sorry, yeah, okay. Take this down a notch.
yes.
But yeah, if we
That makes
switch
sense.
those 2 meetings, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Great
I think that's
suggestion. And does that make you feel a little bit better about?
It does, because I think I think one of the huge advantages of being in this room is to vet, like, what are some potential parcels of land? What could they be used for? How could we match what we're hearing with the size that we're looking for, with some of the restrictions and input from this group? And then at least have sort of a rough idea with what's feasible going into the public.
But I do think
Hearing
it's a great idea to open the public meeting with sort of a summary from what you guys have heard already. Sort of a stipulation, like, yes, we know that there's a user base for a skate park, and here's the commentary that we've heard, and then sort of ask for new voices as well.
Yep.
Or, just to stand up and say, I support the skate park, but maybe not, you want to do a whole, another explanation when you to just allow space for more input.
Yes, I think that would be a constructive way to
Yeah.
facilitate.
And I'd like to find out from this group, like, there are things that I or the commission have heard of that, that the public has come to us, but the public doesn't always come to us. Like, what are the other unmet needs? There are certainly some unmet needs. Like, you asked, what are the highest unmet needs? Well, there's highest unmet needs and the highest vocal group. Those aren't necessarily the same.
Right.
I mean, every group thinks that theirs is, as would I, if it was my group. So it's a matter of like, what else, what are we missing? Since this has come into fruition, I've heard some whisperings of new, like the tennis people have come out more to me about courts and pickleball and separating them. And there's a new group that wants to do street hockey at Pollard, which is currently being used for a plethora of things, not tennis courts. So like there are things that are starting to come out. So I think the public hearing And the people in this group that like it's really important to find out what else is out there that people are talking about, but the town. It doesn't mean we can get to all of them, but it does help us prioritize the list.
Right, I would say the focus, we have them enumerated, I know that was included but not limited to.
Yes.
But I think these are really what the select board and I think Park and Rec said are the needs, otherwise we can start chasing these smaller needs, but I think we should, you're right, be aware of them and kind of maybe put that in their own bucket for, a discussion.
Well, right,
yeah.
and if there's like a specific need that seems smaller, but it also requires much less space, that's
Yes.
something we could possibly check off the list.
Mhm.
Earlier, depending on where we can put it, so it's,
Yeah.
there's so many moving factors here.
There's a lot,
Space and investment.
Yes.
yes.
I think looking at it kind of holistically, like we've talked about before, and you were saying, assessing every parcel for any potential one of these projects, and then determining which one is best suited for each, and being fiscally responsible. So like perhaps the pickleball courts could go in 4 of the 7 locations, say. But if we put the skate park on one of them, that's going to be the better, use of our money. So
Mhm.
assessing it that way
Yep.
and knowing what all these other potential future needs may be will also help us determine whether we tear something down completely or rehab it for a different use. You know what I mean? So we're looking kind of all the way down the line. So we are being responsible with whatever we're doing.
Could folks comment maybe briefly on what people have said about the Charles River access? Because it sort of stands at I've heard around town pickleball and skate parks and stuff like that. I don't know what that relates to as much.
So there was a project that started long before my tenure.
5, 6 years. ago,
Yep,
yeah.
about another access or creating a better access to the Charles River. But it has since been pulled off,
Correct,
taken off of capital and CPC as an option. But we did leave it in there in the event that that is something that more people, now that it's been a few years, if that's something that may come back around.
I thought that project was approved at town meeting, or was that just?
it
a study?
was, so what happened was, and I'm in favor of the Charles River access, probably there because of me, but, sorry.
Well, I agree
Just like
with
the
you,
skate park,
I
right,
didn't-
so it went to Conservation Commission, and there were some issues with the design. It seemed to be, from my point of view, a little bit over-designed of what the intent was, really, to just kind of make their access there, and then it got pulled because it wasn't really ready for prime time to get the approvals. But yeah, town meeting did support that, and I think we have to look at it there as well as if we do acquire the new Foster property, which town meeting approved as well, and if that does go through, there's Charles River access there, and maybe there's a better way through conservation to make that,
That's two
accessible.
different parts of the Charles.
Correct.
Because one's above the dam and the
Yep.
other one's below the dam. So
Absolutely,
Unless
yes.
you really like walking around the streets with your canoe,
Mhm.
why can't you look at 2 places?
Yes, correct. I agree with you. Yeah, I think that would be a tremendous asset, and I think it's something that has been pushed aside, but I think it's something that if this group finds, the need to move ahead, and I think we're almost there as far as, we have the money for feasibility, and I think it's something that we could design, get moving.
But that's why it's on this.
Yeah, no, that's helpful. I
Part
just
of the
didn't have
chart.
any context. Like
Yep.
the other things were sort of obvious, even if I hadn't heard of them.
Yes.
Right, and we're not talking about things that are mutually exclusive either. So, right.
So how do you talk about off-leash dog areas if it doesn't cost any money? Just, an allowable use.
Well, I think there are a bunch of issues to consider. And so partly the off-leash dog issue is space. But there are other issues with that one in particular about what's allowable in different areas. So I think that's a slightly more complicated one. Shall I float my plan?
If you want to, sure.
Getting too far ahead of.
We're getting a little bit in the weeds.
All
but,
right, well,
but oh, if
then,
you have a-
well, wait, I have a
No,
little,
I
I have a
wanna
little
hear.
plan,
Okay.
and I
Hear
wanna
it.
float, but I don't
Float
wanna,
it
I don't
out.
wanna, I was already like jumping the gun a little bit before, so I don't wanna throw anybody off. But I was thinking about this. And I think you and I talked very briefly, maybe not, about making some much smaller dog parks. So I know there was a dog group that was using the tennis courts at Pollard this summer. And so using that as a guiding size to establish, at least one test of a fenced dog park on one of our green spaces that is not a children's park, but more of a sort of those little pocket parks that are median areas, green spaces that are not really, that don't really have a singular user base. To fence off a small area there, this would be a dog park for socializing, not for long runs, not for throwing balls, but for drinking coffee and having your dogs like tussle about with each other. And
But that's what people are looking for, is someplace to throw a ball so the dog can chase it and come back, because that's what's happening already anyway.
right, so we have that at Ridge Hill. And this would be a different sort of dog park that would be a lot like the ones, the group that was at the tennis courts. Because there are many needs to consider. There are a lot of people who are not happy with the idea of off leash at parks during off hours. So when you take into account all the different users, people walking on the streets, people also walking their dogs who have to walk by a place where unfenced off-leash dogs are, we find that to be problematic. Trying to find some kind of compromise solution that might work to allow people and their dogs to socialize, but not to keep other people from using the same space. And so this was one solution that I thought it
I think
flowed.
it'd be interesting to hear from those advocating for a dog park.
Yeah.
To hear which direction.
Well, I think this is the thing,
Yeah.
right? Is that I think, so I have an idea. I mean, I'm not a dog owner. So, so I think what I was hoping for, because it's clear, I think, Susan, that you have an idea of what you're hoping for. What I think is important is to get wider public comment, and so that we understand what the parameters are of what people are hoping for, and then we can find something that fits, that is inevitably going to be a compromise.
Well, for example, the golf course. People have been going to the golf course in the winter for years. you know,
Yes,
Many, many, many years. There was an incident this year, and unfortunately, it was an incident. You get a bad dog owner and it ruins it for everybody. So now the golf course is no longer accessible to any dogs unless they're on leash.
right,
And
Which
so
is-
you know,
the law.
no, the golf course is leased out to a
Understand.
private entity.
Yeah,
And, so people are looking at how come things are getting restricted more instead of looking at what's been happening for many, 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 many years
right.
and try to come up with a solution. Is it early morning hours only? Is it,
Right, so I think
certain,
so we need all this
areas.
public comment
Right.
to get the parameters. I mean, again, like, we don't want to get too far into the weeds here. But I think this is the point of the public comment period, which is why I feel like we need that information to assess our inventory
so-
and not the other way around. But I hear that, both parts are needed.
I also think that, to your question about it's free, why not, whatever. I think if we're going to invest even minimally, like into a dog park, which I think there is a lot
I
of
don't think
interest
it's a dog park that people are really
Just
looking for. I
open
think they
space.
want to be able to use the open space that's already available, like they
Right.
have been forever,
in. So,
without
right, but-
major restrictions.
but in terms of like this particular process, a dog park could go any number of places. We have lots of opportunities for that, which is, we're very lucky in that regard. However, these other pieces can't, and so we're trying to determine what locations would be best to be like, okay, these are gonna be ideal for dog owners for the very reason, like, this has a huge field that if we put a skate park on it, then 80% of it is gonna be wasted space, right? So we figure out where the things that require infrastructure and can only be placed in certain locations, and then we can evaluate, again, kind of everything else that is not usable for those things, and then determine those uses for dogs. But that'll be a quick, again, like building, I think, a skate park is going to take a lot longer. Assessing where that skate park goes and then determining what areas could be used for dogs
Some of these
is
needs will
going
be
to
less
be
flexible
easier.
than others.
Yeah.
For sure.
So your plan is to look at more than just a couple little fenced in areas for off-leash dogs, or are you limiting?
I think,
No,
I
no,
think
that
we were
was-
not, we were just mentioning.
That was an
one-
idea.
One
Okay.
idea,
No, that's-
and it's
Yes.
not limiting the discussion, but I think we have to recognize that that one in particular, I can see how you have a lot of strong feelings about it, but I can assure you that there's equally strong opinions about whether or not dogs should be off leash anywhere. So we have to consider those things, which I think are a little bit more thorny than the location of a skate park. So I think we just have to prepare ourselves for discussion.
And defense, like that really is.
Yeah, we have to maintain open minds and maybe rule out some of these harder to place uses, like a skate park first, because that's going to be easier. We knock those off the list and then we return to these other needs that are still unmet needs and we still have to deal with.
Okay.
But they can't be in, those two needs, don't seem to me like they would exist in the same place necessarily. So that makes it a little easier. And then as we go, we narrow down the slots, right?
Well,
But I
I
don't
would
think that
just
anyone's
say,
coming
yeah,
in with preconceived notions about where.
no,
one thing
and I know
has to
we'll
be.
do this, this is for the next meeting to really get into more of these, but you're right, there are a lot of strong opinions out there of what we should prioritize. Ultimately, we'll have a vote of this committee to set those priorities and we'll go from there. But we do want to hear from all these different user groups, and that, to my question is, Stacy, you're able to reach out, or you could tag each of these and pretty much let whoever the head of that user group or known user group is, plus obviously our public,
Yes, and we did
notice,
that
but-
for even this meeting, so we do
Okay.
have some folks here and in the audience that
Great.
are, specific to those
Great.
interests.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
So they kind of represent.
Yes.
Mhm. All right.
Did anyone want to discuss anything else that we've covered thus far? Good. So the rest of the draft work plan, does that suit everybody?
Yeah, it
Mhm.
seems.
Yeah.
And obviously, if some other things come up, we can always
That's
right.
amend it, but for now, it
It's a
looks
good
like
outline.
flipping those two, make the rest of it look fine.
Okay, so Stacy, maybe you can take us through this overview of Park and Rec capital priorities.
Oh, yes, I'd love to. It's my favorite thing. It's the colorful sheet. We did it as big as we had, and I do apologize. So this is our capital plan. This is a working document and it goes out 10 years. So when each department applies for capital funding, we really only go out 5 years. But if you look at some of our frequent flyers, let's say like a playground project. So a playground is good for anywhere from 15 to 25 years. We have 18 playgrounds in town. So even if I did one a year, which is wildly impossible, we would be on a playground rotation. But if you look at the playground project, sort of in the middle, it goes 1 year for design and then the following year for construction. The next playground that we have just identified that we're applying to CPC for is the DeFazio Tot Lot. So that's why that one is specific, but the other ones kind of rotate. Same thing for the outdoor courts. Outdoor courts can encompass tennis courts, pickleball courts if we get there, basketball courts, sort of anything. But similarly, it would be a rotating schedule of a design 1 year and a construction the next year. That being said, sometimes basketball courts don't involve that much heavy lifting, so it'll just depend on the year. The action park feasibility is where we're at. The athletic fields master plan study, that's in the 26. So I don't know if any of you realize, but in 2021, we did a playground assessment of all of our playgrounds in town that basically rated them good, bad, and ugly. Okay, so, and all of our playgrounds were prioritized, and then each playground within itself, there was a like pecking order of the things that needed to get done first. So right now we have we have 3 playgrounds that need to be renovated. We can't do them all at the same time. But that's where DeFazio came in at number 1. That playground is over 30 years old, I believe, with very minimal upgrades. And now with every upgrade, we have to do some serious accessibility, either surfacing or accessibility to actual playground pieces. So that's why the number you see tends to jump a little bit for the construction projects. We would like to do something similar with athletic fields. So to have a consultant come out, look at all of our fields, figure out which one it's time to renovate, which ones need that sort of like middle to high cost of maintenance to get it back where it should be, and the ones that are doing pretty well and need a few bells and whistles to keep it going. That's the idea of the master plan. Purchase of open space is a placeholder that just gives us an opportunity to apply for money if a space becomes available, just so that the FinCom and the select board are aware of it coming down the pipe. Park bathrooms. We can talk about my feelings about park bathrooms on another day. But that was in the same vein of like, do we need to renovate, upgrade, or go with porta potties, because they are actually significantly less maintenance than fully plumbed bathrooms in New England specifically.
So can I just ask you one question?
Yeah.
It doesn't look like there's any dollar value assigned to bathrooms. Is that just because it's like a theoretical?
It's a theoretical, and we are sort of moving toward, because of the cost of maintaining the bathroom, just like opening, closing, repairs, vandalism, but also we have to bid out the cleaning of them. That the costs are getting so ridiculous that we are actually moving towards more porta potties. Hopefully making them look less like porta potties and slightly nicer. But that's why the number was pulled out, was because are we gonna actually, I mean, the biggest public bathroom we have is at DeFazio, and I don't know if anybody has been in there recently, but it's unpleasant. And probably needs to just be like, in all of our bathrooms outside of the Mills bathroom and Memorial, so is that Claxton, Cricket's gone, Claxton and DeFazio are no longer up to code. So the minute we touch those bathrooms are gonna have to double and or triple in size. Like the DeFazio bathrooms will have to be significantly bigger because of the upgraded regulations.
Stacy, a question on the playground project, DeFazio design.
Mhm.
So here we are with, trying to determine where things are going to go. Has that been voted by the commission as far as moving forward? Or is that something where if we look at one of these uses and we say, that playground there could be better used for another purpose? Is that a possibility? Where is that in? Is that going to the
It's going to
annual
C-
town meeting? Or
Yes.
it's going to, okay,
It's going to CPC.
okay. So I
So-
assume that Park and Rec's discussed that that's really the track they want to be on.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, but the idea is like right now, DeFazio, that space for a playground is too large. So the footprint of the playground is going to shrink significantly. It'll be about 1/4 of the size.
Okay.
We, as a commission, talked about other options there, and
Mhm.
it always comes down to parking. I don't know if you've ever been to DeFazio on a Saturday morning in the fall or the spring.
Try a Thursday night.
Just bring your bike, just bicycle in, you'll be better off, or skate, like, there's no parking, so anything that involves more traffic and more cars is a concern there, so.
But you could get into something, maybe we can get this for next meeting, but just, you could get into something there possibly where you have different hours that don't include the weekends, for example, if it was a park, whatever it is, and say, okay, this is Monday through, not ideal again, but it could maybe, I just want to make sure we're looking at that use now that you're gonna be studying it, and also that's still on the table for, like you said, the other 2/3 of it, that,
I would say it would be, it's.
but
that
that's challenges,
space
I'm not
is-
arguing with that,
Is
Mhm.
is available for other options or
that's fine.
additional.
And we're
options?
limited by the fact, right? I mean, I am only understanding this very service level.
Yep.
But paving is not really an option there.
Understood, yep.
And so that's why a lot of these projects can't go there. Dog park potentially, but then again, you're looking at space. Is it going to be, well, you know, like that's not enough space if you want to throw a ball, even if we had 2/3 of it,
Right.
right? So it really is. that
We can get them, so we can
Yeah.
get into those details. I just want to make sure it's still on the table in some manner, even though we're going to feasibility on it. It sounds like it could be.
It could be,
Okay, great, thank you.
but you know, in a lot of these spaces, we're also this conservation, I mean, we're
Yeah,
gonna.
oh,
be a
yeah,
conservation
no,
committee.
That was-
absolutely.
yeah,
That's,
I was gonna add
There are
that.
the big
challenges to
one.
all of these,
I mean, the
absolutely,
first
yes.
thing we looked at honestly was like, can we put more parking there? But the answer is no.
Mhm.
I mean, we wouldn't gain that much by parking by taking it out because we can't pave anything because of
Right.
stormwater drainage.
Thank you.
And then the last thing is the Pool Beach project. There's two things we're looking to design there, two main things. I mean, if you want to get, if we get more money, I have so many ideas, but there's two main things. Sorry, three main things. One is the retaining wall between the lake and the pool. My very first year, or no, last year, this year was lovely. I'm the only person that was thrilled. We had a drought last year, this summer. It was lovely. In 2021, the lake flooded twice into the pool, to the point where we had fish swimming in the pool. Not very long, they don't last in chlorine very long, but it did flood. So our retaining wall needs to extend further into like the sand down towards Rosemary. The second thing is the sand that was a decision to keep is getting into the filter and ruining the filter. So I'd like to get rid of the sand and maybe put in some sort of turf or other thing that doesn't go directly into our filter system and clog up the filters. And the biggest one, and the one that I hear the most complaint about, is our shade. We don't have any shade at the pool, zero shade. I mean, I can look out my office window and I see people putting blankets underneath the slides, because that's where the shade is. So it's a difficult place to put shade because of where the sun sets over the lake. So there's no way to really protect it, but still at the height of the day, we need some shade structures. And so that's what that project is about.
And that's going to town meeting, is that going to,
That is
CPC?
going,
is there a CPC?
no, it went to Capitol.
What's the difference between Action Park and Skate Park?
I am no guru, there is one in the room, but a skate park, basically an action park has like a BMX trail around
No,
it.
There's skate park and such, there are so many other things
Yes.
now. Skate park, inline skating,
Can I just-
BMXing. all
Can I
that
interrupt
stuff.
for 1 sec?
Yeah.
Can I just ask you if you're gonna, can you just introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry.
For the- yeah,
I
the- for the
totally,
peeps.
yeah,
Yep.
Josh Conlon, sorry. But yeah, because it is so much more than just a skate park, from BMX to scooters to
Yep.
inline, to everything that turns skate park is sort of dated, and most skate parks and skate park companies that are doing this are now calling them action parks, just as there's something more usage than that.
So are we looking at two different things, because it's
No.
two different line items here. Is top of the sheet
Mm-hmm.
says Action Park feasibility study, and then down below it says Skate Park feasibility study.
So that actually,
I'll take two.
yes. I think it went in as let me pull that up for you. Oh, actually, it's more probably in the group. It is an action park.
Okay.
So the skate line should just go away?
So
Skate Park has one line.
I think it's just we
Yes.
can,
this feasibility study.
right,
But it's further out.
yeah, so we
So
can
it
just
was
combine
pulled
it.
out. If you see, like, it says not submitted. So
Yeah.
it was originally in there and
Okay.
then So it was in last year's 5-year capital plan.
Skate park was the original term, it's been in the capital plan and then the
Yes.
OSRP for years.
And so that's why it was not submitted, but then the action part. was notified. And the actual in your packet,
Yeah.
They are really one and the same.
Yeah.
they are.
In this budget. Okay. Good catch.
And then the rest of the things, the capital project with Parks and Forestry are mainly field or Walker Pond renovations. And some park fencing improvements. Does anybody have any questions on any of those?
I guess just with the tennis, and I know we voted that at town meeting, the design and construction, is there
Mhm.
any element of that that's considering pickleball, or is pickleball outside of that purview?
We can look at pickleball up there. Because I did speak with MIAA about the rules about putting additional lines on, because those would be the high school tennis courts. It is allowed. It just has to be very specific colorings and everything else. But of all the courts in town, that would be the toughest one to play pickleball at, because Mills you can play during the day. Newman is most of the time far enough away from the school that you can play during the day, but the high school courts cannot be accessed during the school day.
Right, I'm not advocating for it, I just want to know again if
It
that's
is,
something that's,
everything is in that
because then we
design.
might hear from, and I see Dan's on, yeah, I was
Yep.
waiting for that. We have the athletic director here would have an opinion, and that might just take it off, so.
Yeah, thanks, Matt and Stacy. I think if what was talked about in terms of the tennis courts at the high school, if kind of what was proposed in putting additional courts up there, right? Currently, there are only 4. If we could add 2 additional courts, then that would allow us to play varsity and JV matches there. And I think that's what causes sort of a logjam on the tennis courts right now, with only 4 courts at the high school. And we have to use Newman and or Mills right now. With the high school being offline, we're using Newman and Mills. But if we can successfully put 6 courts up there, which I think we can, then that's going to sort of alleviate the need to use Newman and Mills, and could be a potential spot for pickleball courts.
Thank you.
Also, can we include, I mean, I think there's a plan to put some pickleball courts on the Muzzy site. Do we get to count those in our inventory at least?
As long as they allow the public to access them.
I think that's the plan.
That is the
Assuming
plan.
that's-
Yes.
Currently,
that's the plan.
currently that's the
We don't have
plan.
any control over that.
We don't have any
Paper.
control.
There's
over
no
it.
control. Right, there's
Yeah.
no,
They're promising they could say 2 years after they develop them,
absolutely.
they don't want them.
Well, it could be a condition
We have
of the
control
permit.
over the other ones.
Right.
Yes.
Right?
We might not count them, but it could be a condition of the permit that have to do it. So I think if that is a condition, they would, but you're right, we probably shouldn't count on them right now. I just heard rumblings of
I
it.
would avoid it.
Yes, I did.
Personally.
We've heard it too.
Okay.
So, but I'm hoping for the best, but not counting.
Sure.
Stacy, as far as when we get into this for the next meeting, demand, supply and demand, right? How do we determine, and I know we have a good idea with tennis and what the high school needs, but how do we determine, for example, for pickleball, that we have enough courts? Because we don't want to have 2 at the high school and then Mills, and then, they just stay there empty with these lines that people are like, I wish they were here. So how do we get, and I talk to other towns, what do we,
Yeah, so basically I've already talked to a bunch of our community colleagues.
Okay.
Pickleball courts aren't generally empty. So that is not usually an issue. They are very
Okay.
busy and very vocal. It's just a matter of what can we afford
okay,
to give them. And right now we are working, we have a pickleball policy where the pickleball people at Mills have primary access to 2 of the courts for certain times of the day. And then afterwards, it's first come, first serve. It is working great on paper. I do not know that it is working so great in action. Which is why we currently have we have pickleball courts up at the tennis courts at the high school, because we were able to like fit in a pickleball court where there isn't too many issues of cracking and bending and rolled ankles. But again, in the summer, they can use it whenever they want, but they can't use it during the day right now. I mean, all the courts are closed right now, but
Okay,
so that is the Band-Aid. That is a few additional courts until the tennis court construction goes through. Once that starts, that will take those out of rotation as well.
I'd also say in terms of demand, there is, and correct me if I'm wrong here, a question of how many of the pickleball users are legitimately Needham residents and following the policy of buying passes. So I think if
Okay.
we stick to our rules, right,
Mhm.
that have been in place for tennis for
yeah,
since the dawn of time, then I think that we consider that the legitimate user group may be smaller and therefore have to assess what those needs actually are based on that.
right. If we
So
had
just
signs,
something
we
to
would
consider.
understand how many actual users there are, and we could see how much that would grow, and then that would give us an idea of user.
And
you
it's
know, amount
definitely
of
a
users.
growing sport.
Yes, oh, I
Like,
know.
Everywhere you
Yeah,
see it,
everywhere
it's
you
like,
see it, yeah.
holy smokes,
I've never
it's
done it.
everywhere. But I think like that
That's a
would be an
good way
important.
for it to get some numbers, okay.
Anyone else? Any comments on the capital projects?
Oh, I have a quick.
Yeah.
What is McLeod?
McLeod. So it's a park at the Fazio. It's one of the fields.
Oh, okay, I just didn't know, I'd never heard that. term.
Yep, it's the one, when you drive in, it's the one that's like basically straight ahead. It's the JV baseball field.
Oh, okay. I know it.
Which in our Roar equity lens, we realized that softball does not, we have far less softball fields. And the girls varsity softball field does not have a premier field. So we, the plan for McLeod is to turn that field into the premier varsity softball field.
Very good. I just had never heard.
Yep.
What's the plan for
All
Claxton?
7 fields up there have a
Have a
different
different
name.
name, fine. I call them all the same.
So what's the plan for Claxton if they're moving girls softball?
There will still be a renovation, because we still don't have enough fields, softball fields in town. We have about 30 diamond, no, not 30. 17 or 18 diamonds, and we have for baseball, and we have like 4 for softball.
So softball and Little League baseball can share a diamond.
Yes. The problem is the mound. So depending on how old the Little League team is, because softball has no mound, it's flat, but as they get older, there is a mound. And there are lots of options, but Claxton 1 and 2 will stay softball fields. And there'll be upgrades there. But the one down at DeFazio will be the premier, the varsity field. The other thing we also noticed is that there are no dugouts in any of the softball fields, where there are many dugouts in all of the baseball fields. So we're just like, as we look, I try to look through all of our facilities with an equity lens and try to play a little catch up. As we do these big renovations, making sure that we're getting those things in there.
Stacy, how many, probably a stupid question, but how many extra lines, how many lines have to be put down on a tennis court to put a pickleball court on a tennis court?
It's an entirely new court. So I don't know exactly how many lines, but it basically, if you use the tennis net as a divider, you can fit 1 pickleball court on this side and 1 pickleball court on that one, but they share no lines.
So like at Mills Field right now, you can play 2 games of pickleball on 1 tennis court.
Yes.
But does it upset the tennis players when they want to come and play tennis? These
Yes.
lines, if they're there, it does?
Yes.
Yeah, I would assume so.
I mean, so at the beginning, when we were doing this as a pilot, we put tape down. And that was more problematic. The tape was slippery, it would rip up. There's a whole bunch of things that are happening. Now that they're painted, they're less invasive. But yeah, the tennis people want access to the tennis courts, and the pickleball people want
Mhm.
access to the pickleball courts.
Right.
All right. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to discuss before we move on to planning some meetings. Not ones that I make up. Okay, so I think we have our, if we repurpose our next meeting, the meeting that was supposed to be our public meeting, we have that date already. It doesn't-
Then we're looking at Tuesday. Do Tuesdays work for everybody?
Absolutely not.
Okay, they do not.
I mean, it would be helpful if it was a different day
All right, well,
or later. Tuesdays are a tough day.
okay, but this next meeting that we.
Yeah,
I have,
that's
I have
scheduled-
rearranged
We're
childcare
good.
that day,
Okay.
so it's really just the ones after that.
Okay. So, we're looking at 2 meetings in, where did this go?
February.
2 meetings in February.
That's
Good.
rough.
About February 6th.
What day of the week is that?
That's a Monday.
It's a Monday.
We have a-
No, it's off our schedule.
I have another meeting that day, but it's not till 7:30.
Okay, so we could do,
could do it
we
earlier.
could do 5:30. I think that works for, does that work for everybody? 5:30?
What's the earliest people can generally make? I guess that would be my question.
9 a.m.
Well, that's what I'm saying, like, is there anyone, like, do we have a group that could primarily do morning meetings ever or not? I mean, that's just.
I'm sure
Yeah,
other
I
people-
can't.
You can't, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. I can't either.
Okay,
That's it.
So I could be available. as
5:30?
Early as 4, but I think there were
5 or
other
5:30
folks,
is
maybe.
yeah, I think John's, yeah, I think
John that
5:30.
needed to be, although I think that might have just been a Tuesday.
Oh, maybe.
I was one of the people that thought it was harder to get here
Okay,
earlier, but Mondays are better early. I mean, like I could do 5 instead if people are looking at them.
Dan, do you have
Okay,
a,
I think John's
John's
was-
gone.
John's on there.
Yeah, but he
Who's
wanted
also-
earlier too, so 5 might work for him.
We have stuff all over the place, so I'll make it work, whatever you guys
Okay,
decide.
you want to say 5?
Okay, so do we want to say February 6th at 5?
Yeah,
Okay. Then, wait a second, so, but now that would be our public meeting.
That one should probably be later.
yeah, that's
Oh,
right. Okay,
sorry.
So,
Forgot about that.
so we could do 6 o'clock for that?
so,
That's when we have our,
yeah,
yeah.
I know you have a meeting, but since this is a public meeting, do you feel like, I mean, what I mean is, we're not gonna be having discussion amongst the group. Do you feel like that would be okay with you, or would you prefer to reschedule?
Well, if you start at 6, you said your meeting's not till 7:30?
It's not till 7:30. I can get someone else to unlock the building.
Okay, we
right.
should be able to get through that.
So if we say February 6th, at,
Yeah.
what did you say, 6 p.m.
6 PM.
For the public meeting? Okay. Great, we're off to a good start.
The 20th is a holiday.
Yes, it's vacation, so the 13th or 27th.
Neither of those work because Park and Rec has meetings those nights, unless we do them early.
And is no Thursday meetings a thing?
Yeah, typically.
That's a thing, okay.
Could we do, are we sold on having the meetings
At
in this
5.
building?
Yeah, if we could do it 5 o'clock.
I was gonna say, if we did them over at the Parks and Rec building, then we're automatically there for our next meeting and we could do them and just bleed right in.
What time's your meeting?
7.
Oh, if we did this at 5, then that's fine too.
Yeah, do you want to do it 5 o'clock? Does that work for you?
What date? did
The
we-
27th, because the 13th is a field summit. Please don't double me up on that day.
5 o'clock.
Okay,
So are we saying the 27th?
Yeah, 5 o'clock.
5, and that one's at,
RRC.
Okay.
And we have the owl set up there too, so we can hybrid it as well.
okay. So going into March 6th,
Mhm,
is that too soon, or is that enough time?
that's fine. with me. That work for you?
the date again?
The 6th?
Monday, March 6th?
We're doing back to back.
Yeah, so that's why I'm asking, is that enough time?
Who knows?
Also 5.
I mean, we could do the
We could stretch it to the 13th.
13th
I
and the
suppose.
27th. Because then we just roll into our meetings again.
You prefer to do just one long day of meetings, so that's easier.
I mean, I have all long days of meetings, so,
What do you guys prefer?
yeah, it's up to the group.
That actually might. What?
Wait, to do what?
For,
At
for the part,
5:30.
for us to do parks and like this right before our Parks and Rec meeting, as opposed date wise.
Right, but that date was what, the 27th? Because that seems to me to be a long time.
No, 13th.
No,
Oh, the
13th and the
13th. Oh, okay,
27th.
Yeah,
yeah.
13th
Alright.
and the 27th. Right, because we do 2 in March.
Okay,
So we would
March
not do March
13th,
6th, we would do March 13th.
Right.
And 27.
Mhm.
Yeah.
March.
And that's at Park and Rec
Yes.
And that's at 5.
and fun.
Both of those meetings at the same time, at the same place, okay.
Mhm.
And then the next meeting would be the second public hearing.
Yes, so that
Yes.
looks like,
So we're gonna have to have our draft recommendations ready on, well, March 27th or thereabouts, right?
mhm.
So that the public can comment on. Them. So. Okay, so then that other, the
10th?
second public meeting, 10th is Easter.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Or
Well, we
Easter
also have
observed-
our-
Observed.
We have our Park and Rec meeting, so we wouldn't be able to do a public meeting that late
What, on the 10th?
on April 10th, yes.
I wonder if we could,
Easter.
how hard would it be to switch?
It's on my calendar.
I'm missing another meal. Uh,
We could always ask Chris to move it.
Yeah, we
if
could move that.
it.
April
Um,
10th.
Well,
And
it's
switch.
it's a holiday though. I mean, because Easter Sunday is the 9th, which means I don't know, I think people will be out of town if we're coming back into town. I don't know.
11th is election night.
Yeah, 11th the next, and that's what I'm thinking. So we have to go.
What about
the
the
17th?
Seven.
Because that's school vacation probably.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think Easter, like.
Yeah, I think Monday's fine. I've never
You
heard
think
of
it's
this.
fine?
Yeah.
Okay.
As
Alright.
an Uber counselor representing Easter, I think
Perfect.
it's probably. okay.
Yeah, right.
I don't know.
The 10th would work that.
Yeah.
So, okay, so
So that could be, that's a 6 PM meeting, correct, for a public meeting?
6.
If we did 6:30 and we had Parks and Rec at 5.
Yeah, we could flip
6:30.
We can worry about Park and Rec.
You wanna do-
But that should be at Powers Hall.
Yes, public hearing, we're saying 6:30 now, 6:30? Because you guys have a 5?
Well,
At 6:30.
depending.
Okay,
6:30 is better anyway.
fine.
And that's gonna be
It's not
here.
big enough.
The Powers
Powers
upstairs.
Hall, yeah.
February 6th meeting, we said 6, right? That will also be
Yes.
a Powers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep,
Okay. And then the 24th would be our
Would be the final.
quote final
Final,
meeting.
yeah, yeah,
We could go back to the 5.
works for me. At Rosemary.
At Rec.
24th, huh?
Are we saying this 24th?
Mhm.
I'm gonna go in the wrong place, just so folks know.
Either
I'll
Katie,
be posted.
either
Yes.
Katie and I will send up, I'll send up some.
I'll be
minutes.
running around town. I'll get there, but.
In between now and the public comment on the 6th.
Oh, the 31st?
Thanks.
And that's here.
Yeah.
What time is that one?
That's
January
it.
31st?
That's
That's the 5, that's the early one.
5:30.
Wait, January 31st is 5:30.
We could always do them Tuesdays. Jason. That would be really bad.
It'd be great. Would you like all of my children to be here at the same time?
That sounds good. I'd love to meet them.
Focus group.
There you go.
Right, focus group. There you go. Skip that.
Oh, they have a lot of opinions.
Bring your kids, my kids.
All right, so everybody has
We're
the
good.
list.
Yes.
Dan, you good?
I am good. Yep, thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, so that's
I move we adjourn.
everything. Wait a second.
Second.
Any
Oh, I can't do
discussion?
it. I can't, you got the second. I can't
Second.
Any discussion? Anything people want to say before we go? All right, we are adjourned.
All in favor?
Oh, yeah. All in favor, right.
Okay.
Aye.
That's-
Thank you.